Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
I have 7 p.m., so I'm going to, seeing a quorum, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'd like you please to put your name and if you want to be associated with a group, put that in the chat as well. This is for the purposes of the clerk who is keeping track of the attendance for the open meeting law. So this is a special meeting held by the Village of Saxtons River Board of Trustees. It is a very narrow agenda, but I encourage all of you to participate. If anyone is having technical difficulties, Rick Holloway has agreed to help out. You can contact him in the chat or offline at 802-376-4639. Okay, it's a hybrid meeting, but I think almost everybody is here on Zoom. Rick, I'm just checking in with you. Is there anybody else at the fire station?
Not that I can see.
Okay, great. All right. So now we're open for public comment. We are about to approach the discussion, but are there any public comments? This is something we always do with the open meeting law. Okay, on to tonight's discussion and vote on the municipal planning grant. And I'd like to begin by thanking everyone who wrote. Those comments have been shared with the trustees. I would particularly like to thank Abigail, Abigail Gold, who wrote to say that she thought that people might be under the assumption that we lack a vibrant center in Saxtons River. And she listed all of the amazing things that happen. Well, not all of them. Who could list all of them? But it's a lengthy and delightful list. So I really appreciate being started off on that positive note. I have Gary Fox, who is present tonight, will answer if there are technical questions on the grants. He was willing to come along and be part of that. Are there any public comments before we go to the trustees? Public comments on the topic of the municipal planning grant? All right, let's begin the trustee discussion then.
So I have a question, more for Gary, I guess. Are we open to discussing any proposal or only the 3 that were submitted to us? In other words,
that's a question for us.
Well, I'm just wondering if the town will entertain a new proposal that we come up with, I guess is really what I'm.
Yeah, so I would like to answer that. So if it's a planning grant for Saxtons River, it's what you decide, and the trustees need to have a motion and make a proposal. I would say the 3 topics that were there are topics that Saxtons River residents brought to us, and that we determined were all competitive and eligible for the municipal planning grant. So the process for putting the grant forward, after you decide on what you want to apply for, the planning commission has to look at it and sign off on yes, they want to move it forward, and then the select board has to authorize to submit it. And so just in terms of projects that you pick, some may be not that good a fit for a municipal planning grant and may not be competitive. And so those would be more likely to get shot down at a planning commission meeting or a select board meeting. But whatever goes in is up to you. And part of the reason I'm here is I read through the minutes, and there were some really good proposals and good discussion. And there were a couple of things that I think would not move forward. So I just wanted to be here to advise on that, not to say you can or can't do anything in particular.
Carl, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I
I have a question.
I just wanted to make sure that, that we were able to make a different slant on a topic or come up with something entirely new. Just want to make sure we weren't wasting our time.
Okay.
I have a question.
Matt, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't able to attend the last meeting and trying to do catch up here. So in this, would a design work for a new fire station fall into this category?
Where would it fall in, or could it fall in?
No, does it fall into the category of this grant?
I think so. I don't want to speak for everybody else. My interpretation is that it does, and it could fall into
that
it.
Seems to be the number one thing we need. We had you know, a design of a fire station that ended up being $1.3 million worth of fire station that we can't afford. If we can get a planning grant to design a fire station we can afford, then I think that should be top priority of this planning grant without question.
Let's put Gary on the spot again. Gary, the municipal planning grant, could it be used to design a fire station?
I believe it could be. I don't think it would be competitive, as you're you're just taking a village service and designing a building, as opposed to taking some problem that's unique to Saxtons River and addressing it. So, for example, just from what I've observed over time, not being that close to it, there's questions about where the fire station would go. Can it go where it is? Is it a problem of falling into the river? Are there other places that it could be? So it seems like a bigger question than just designing a building. And I believe that just a building design, it might be kind of a small scope for a municipal planning grant. And that's not to say that you couldn't decide on that, and we could bring it to the planning commission and to the town to see about doing that. What I read in the minutes from the last meeting did seem appropriate, and you have a property with a nonprofit central to the village that's wrestling with what to do with the property. You have what's highest and best use for the property. You also have a need for a fire station. So examining the appropriateness of that, would it fit on that? Are there constraints? Are there other best uses that you want to evaluate along with it? And if a fire station goes there, what does it look like? What could it, what type of dimension, so to speak, would fit? How would it be feasible for a ladder truck to get in, and or whatever don't have in front of me what fire trucks you have, but would it be feasible for those size trucks to get in and out of that lot? Is it so I don't know where the fire station conversations are. If you're looking to put a building where the building is currently, and that's what you want to do, and you want to just design a building, I don't know that's a competitive grant. You've done that before. You've had designs done for it. You certainly ask for that.
So I have a question.
Matt, let's follow up with Matt, and then we'll take the next one.
Can you redefine, again, I apologize for not being up to speed. Can you redefine the competitive wording that you're using? Because if we're going to redesign a fire station that we can afford on the site that we already own, then how does that competitive wording go in there? Because obviously it would go out to bid for the design work. And that question's for Gary.
So I believe that you all have links to the municipal planning grant, and it it describes them, and they're very competitive. The goal of the municipal planning grant is to it's to help you solve problems in your village planning. So if the fire station is designing a fire station, again, is the biggest planning issue that you have in Saxtons River, and that's in the most immediate need, and you want to put that in, maybe it would fly, and it wouldn't it wouldn't be really expensive, which also would might make it easier to go through.
Okay. And who decides on this? I think you already said that, but.
Well, so for the submission, first the planning commission, the planning commission will look at the application and authorize moving it forward. They have to sign off on it, and then the select board has to agree to submit the planning application, and then it goes to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and they look at it with all of the planning grants that they have, and they decide to award it or not.
Okay. Is there a minimum or a maximum that is involved in that, or you just kind of take it as it comes?
Yes, there's a maximum. I don't believe there's a minimum.
It's $22,000, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to call on Carl next, and then Rick. Carl, go ahead.
Well, I just have a follow-up for Gary on competitive. When you say the fire station would not be competitive, do you mean at the level of the planning commission and the select board, not moving forward, or do you mean at the level beyond the town?
Yeah, no, I mean at the level of the at the state level, and I'm not on the state board. I could be wrong on that. It's just that you've had designs done on that before. But if you put yourself in the place of a state board looking at the application, that's just my perspective. And I'm not on that board, so I don't know for a fact that it wouldn't be a competitive application. It doesn't appear that way to me. But if the trustees determine what you want to do is a building design for a fire station on that lot, I'm happy to work on that application and walk it through the paces.
Carl, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that answered it for me. Thank you.
Rick.
I just wanted to throw in there that I'm not, Gary keeps referring to a building design for the lot that we have. And Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong in your interpretation, what you're actually asking, but my assumption of the question of this for the fire department would be more of, is this still the right, to use the grant to determine, is this still the best spot? Is there a better spot? How would the logistics of everything work out? Like, the idea of the dish lot becoming the fire department, well, then there's a whole slew of questions there beyond whether the building fits, is with things like parking and access to, Main Street Arts there, so from my perspective, when we talk about this grant and the fire station, it's not about we have plans. We just need money to build the plant, to build the building here. If we were going to, in my opinion, if we were going to use this planning grant money for the fire station, it would be for review of what we have and review of other opportunities for the fire station.
So I'm going to add my 2 cents, which is I am concerned that we write a planning grant that can be phased in over the next, maybe, 5 to 10 years. And I think the real concern that I'm increasingly hearing about the fire station is that paying for it on top of the tax obligations we have at this moment would be very challenging for the village. So I'm not, I mean, I think we've been pursuing the fire station, but I would be more interested in throwing my vote towards looking at the whole design in the area of, say, the Main Street Arts to the current location for the fire department. And going back to the phrase that Gary used, finding the highest and best use for that property that is Tenney's Hardware.
I have a question. Matt. So I disagree with you completely. It's been frustrating over the years to get to a point where we have a $1.3 million design for a fire station. Our number one goal should be to put our firefighters and our EMTs in a building that they don't have to zigzag their apparatus in. The second floor is condemned on the fire station. And
okay, Matt, I'm going to ask you to speak to the municipal planning grant tonight, though.
I am saying that that's where the money should go. To study whether it should be at its current location or not, I think is a waste of money. And I feel strongly that it should be to design a building that we can afford, which is doable, but we need prints that can go out to for bids. So we need a complete set of prints, not something on a piece of paper that we came up with. So I think if this money is used for anything else, it's a travesty that we have put the fire station off again.
Okay. Carl, do you want to speak to the water grant?
Well, I have a question for Matt first.
Okay.
My recollection that at one point the fire station committee discussed the Dish property. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
Come again? I didn't quite hear the rest of that. I'll turn my volume.
I understood that the use of the Dish property for the fire station had been discussed by the committee, and the site was determined not to be suitable. Can you?
That's correct. That's correct. Yes, the size of the lot. Certainly, a building would fit on there, but when you have the firefighters and EMTs showing up, they have to come in and drop their cars and get to the building. When you have other fire stations coming to cover, again, the ladder truck has got to be able to, from a different town, has got to be able to fit inside in the winter months. So it wasn't the right, didn't seem to be the right location or size. And to follow up with that, we extensively looked at many sites other than the current site to build a new fire station, and just couldn't come up with one.
Hold on, Gary. Carl, follow up?
Yeah, just to respond. So how much more space is there at the current location than there would be at the Dish building? I'm not very good with dimensions.
I couldn't tell you that right offhand.
The Dish building is 0.41 acres.
Yeah, I don't know what our current site is, but it's larger than that. I mean, there's a large area there.
Okay, thanks.
Do you know what the address is? I could get the size of the lot pretty quickly.
I don't, but I bet Louise Loring does. Louise, the address of the fire department? And you're muted.
It's Main Street, Saxtons River.
I think it's
probably something.
44.
Is it 44?
Sounds about right.
Something like that.
Okay, but so while I'm looking that up, I just wanted to comment the as I'm listening to the conversation, why I think that the municipal planning grant would be uncompetitive for a
44.
building design. I've never seen the municipal planning grants do that. I think we circulate some of the examples of successful planning grants, and
we did. We did.
And the other one of the questions they always ask, especially commerce and community development, is, have you looked for other funding sources, and are there other more appropriate funding sources? And the USDA has a community facilities grant. That's exactly what they do, is technical assistance for saying that grant would provide drawings for a fire station. So when different ideas come up for the planning grant, I mean, the idea of sometimes we call it a parking lot, but not to ever discount any ideas. They're all things that could be looked at, or even like in this case that should be done. But it doesn't mean that the municipal planning grant is the right tool. And I'm happy to do a USDA application. There might even be one through BDCC where they already have the money that they could just look at and say, yeah, we could do this project. So I'm happy to explore that for a fire station on that site for those drawings, if the trustees or the fire department says, yes, that's what we want to do. It works on that site. We want to design that. My gut tells me that this is not the right grant for that project. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do that and do it now. I guess that's all I wanted to say with that piece.
Other comments before we leave the fire department and move on to the next project discussion? We're not voting yet. We're just trying to get all the ideas out on the table. Rick?
So Gary is the Rockingham Development Director. If the funds for this are not useful for the fire station, are your services available to us to help find grants and whatnot to get this project moving and complete again?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, happy to do that.
All right, I suggest we move on to the idea of the water grant. This was Carl's suggestion, and I think we have some ARPA information to share, but I want to start off with you. I know that you worked on this proposal, Carl, so why don't you give us a summation?
Okay, well, historically, there were a number of private water lines that served various parts of the village. All of those serving the village north of the river were discontinued just before or around the time the sewers were put in. And the understanding is that all of the residences on that side of the river now are served by private wells, with the exception of 4 houses that are still provided by the Vermont Academy line, and the sprinkler system for the inn, which is also on the Vermont Academy line, and 3 fire hydrants, also on the Vermont Academy line. Now, Vermont Academy is concerned about their water supply, and they are currently in discussions with the town about finding funding to upgrade their system. And I think Gary referenced that at one point in communication with you. And they're at the moment looking for funding for an engineering study to determine the Vermont Academy's needs. The focus is on VA. So I think that the village may or may not be tangentially included in their planning, depending on how their work, how their search for sources pans out. I think that it would be prudent for the village to make sure that we have adequate supply for sprinklers, for fire hydrants, and that should be a priority. And that in order to do that, we really, I think we need help to plan on how to do that. We have also the south side of the village, the upper village, to consider, where there are still a number of private lines, one from the Warner Center, 2 on Clark Court, I think, 1 on Vancourt Drive, private wells that serve multiple houses.
So I have some new information. I'm going to put Gary on the spot again. It turns out that ARPA, the recovery funds may be a better match for this exact project, Carl. More money and a specific targeted close match to what you're asking, but I'm going to ask Gary to address that.
Could I comment before Gary does? Or
sure.
Just that, yes, that is one of the directions that VA and the town are going to be pursuing, is looking into ARPA. So yes, that may be a better match, but I would want to make sure that the village was considered in that.
Well, the ARPA funds are specifically for the village of Saxtons River. So we have the ability to structure that application. At least that's my understanding, if we use those funds. And it's a lot of money. I mean, we could actually
I see what you're referring to, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, but let me ask Gary to comment.
Yeah, so that's certainly true. A direct one of the four primary objectives of the ARPA funds is infrastructure, like water and sewer, and those funds can certainly be used for that. There's funds allocated for Saxtons River that very flexible. If as long as you're doing one of the working towards something that's one of the objectives. So for this water project, your ARPA funds would certainly be eligible. But I believe there may even be some additional state ARPA funds that could be applied for that are specific to water quality for rural villages. And I would have to look at that a little further. I didn't realize the piece that the piece that Carl was describing earlier when I was looking at the fund. So I didn't ask that question about expanding it for the village, but we can do that. And certainly there could, if that wasn't expandable for the village, we could make a separate application for that. I do need to research that further for the extra funds, but the funds already allocated to you, very easy to use it for this water project.
Do you have that number for us, Gary? I'm sorry, I should have it at my fingertips. It seems to me that originally we were told $56,000 over 2 years, but I think that was increased by the county allocation.
Yeah, I can look that up. Hang on a sec. Oh, so the fire department is that lot 44 Main Street is 0.7 acres. So the dish on Main, you are going down to 0.4 acres. But the one thing you have on Main Street you don't have on the other one is a lot of fire departments will put up a flashing light and stop traffic on Main Street when fire engines have to come in or out. Let's see.
Oh, we could do that here.
Yes, we had talked about it.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to continue this discussion about the water infrastructure. So I think Carl put his finger on something that will be very valuable, but if we have a different already, I mean, the great thing about the ARPA money, it seems to me, is that it's not as competitive. It's going to come to us and we have we have to apply for a project that is eligible within those guidelines, but water infrastructure is clearly outlined. And it's more money than the planning grant. We could actually begin implementation.
My recollection is that it's 128,000 allocated for Saxtons River.
That sounds right.
That's not going to go very far if we're looking at a water infrastructure. VA I believe is planning on looking at some of this state money. Which, and I don't know for sure. I was at one meeting where they were looking at grant possibilities, and they're still following up on what's available. But I think we're looking at. It depends on what sort of changes we want to make. But construction is expensive, and 128,000 is not a lot of money.
Good point. But if we're comparing the ability to plan and map, we have a pot of 22,000 with the municipal planning grant. We have a much larger amount available to us from the ARPA funds.
But to do what?
Go ahead.
To do a water infrastructure planning and mapping.
So Saxons River has $148,000 from ARPA.
Well, I had the 8 right.
I had a question.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let's make sure we've beaten this one before we move on.
No, it's regarding this.
Carl, are you okay with what we've uncovered so far?
Well, I just want to make sure you're saying that this would be money that we could survey, plan, and map.
Yes.
Is it an appropriate use of the ARPA funds to do just that scope without a commitment to go forward to any implementation of the plan?
Gary, are you more comfortable with the ARPA funds? Could we use them solely for mapping and planning?
For the water infrastructure, yes. Yeah, I can confirm that. But the way I read it, it is 100% eligible for that.
Okay, Matt, your comments?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the whole water infrastructure. What seems like most everything that's going to be studied and planned and whatnot is privately owned. So I'm not, how does that affect Saxons River? I mean, we looking to a water system for the village of Saxons River, or where are we going with that? I mean, you know, helping Vermont Academy out, we helping out the water center.
Yeah, I can respond to that.
Okay.
So we have an agreement with Vermont Academy that we and a 10-inch main installed down Academy Avenue that provides our current downtown fire protection. Part of that agreement was that Vermont Academy can, under conditions where they have a shortage, their supply is no longer adequate to cut us off at $60. So I'm concerned about that. It hasn't happened, but I'm concerned that it could. The second, are we talking about a municipal system? I don't think that the village would want to do that. I don't think that we would want to take on that financial burden of something that would be more than another sewer plant. And I don't think that people in the village necessarily want to give up what they have, but I think it's important that we know what's there. And I don't think we have a very good feel for, because everything was put in by individual people. I know the water supply to my particular property has changed 3 times over the time that water systems have been piped in, at least. And, I don't know that there's any record of where the supplies to a lot of the houses are. I think we also, a sort of a separate issue is what's the aquifer supply? That was done in a planning grant, according to Ellen Howard, some years ago. I don't know how current that is. I think that would be another issue to look at in terms of planning for water. Are we going to run out? Do we need to look at other sources for our wells? So I didn't want to get into all the details of what we would be looking at, but that's an example.
Okay, follow up, Matt?
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess. It just seems kind of vast. Okay, yeah, you answered it. Yeah.
Okay, we've discussed a site for the fire station. We've discussed Carl's proposal for planning and mapping having to do with the access to clean, safe, affordable water. Carl, how do you feel about using ARPA funds?
If Gary is confident that the ARPA funds are available and can be used for this, I think the information is important, and I don't particularly care how it gets funded, I guess. And I don't know, does the village have other uses that we might want to put that ARPA funding to? So we might want to consider that. Are we competing with something else?
Well, if we look at this planning grant is about $22,000. So that is a chunk of the ARPA money, but it's by no means all of the $148,000.
No, but if we have $170,000 worth of things that we might want to spend ARPA money on, and we had $22,000 coming from this other grant, that would cover our costs.
All right. I did hear one factual question there, and I think Gary answered it. Gary, I believe you said that as far as you can tell, this would be an acceptable purpose for ARPA funds.
It would be, and I'll confirm with Vermont League of Cities and Towns tomorrow. And if the answer was no, you could put some kind of condition on your motion if you want that. But I'm 99% sure that it's a perfect use for ARPA. And I just want to clarify a statement that you cannot do a project and apply $22,000 of municipal planning grant funds to an ARPA project. And municipal planning grants, they want to see a discrete project that will be complete in and of itself and that will be implemented. Yeah, that's...
Okay, I'm sorry that was confusing.
That wasn't what I had intended to say.
Yeah.
But
I didn't think so. I was just clarifying in case it could be interpreted that way.
Okay, are we ready to move on to some of the other proposals? So let's talk about Will's proposal for streetscape in the village. And we have him here, which is great. This is the idea of taking 121 and in using the width of the road with things like, I think at one point Gary recommended things like curb cuts. Gary assures me that this is a thoroughfare for trucks and we would need to make sure that it could continue as a thoroughfare for trucks, but we could still work on the streetscape. That's very possible. I want to give Will a chance in case there's anything he would like to add since his application. Will, you're muted, but this is your chance to pitch it.
Oh, just the whole idea of it. I thought I was just speaking in support of the idea of seeing what can be done to make downtown more pedestrian friendly.
Okay.
So I don't really have anything specific to say. I'm mostly here just to learn how things work.
Okay.
To lend my support to that.
All right. Thank you. Questions from the trustees? And Gary, I saw your hand, but let's make sure we don't have anything from, and I see Carl's hand. Carl, were you waving at me?
No, I have some.
Okay. Matt, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay, Gary, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this isn't really my area, but we did visit Saxtons River Village Main Street and walk it with Chuck. Used to be a transportation planner at a regional planning commission.
So this is Chuck Wise?
Yes. And so we were measuring the road around there and what's possible. And the lanes are required on the state route to be, I think it's like 10 feet for a travel lane. And the shortest you have on each side is like, I don't know, 14 to 19 feet. So there's plenty of room to do things like you could put in bike lanes, you could put in, extend curbs out. So you're not shrinking the visual. I saw in the minutes, people, really like that wide view as you're looking down Main Street. You can do traffic calming things with the edges of the roads and have without shrinking the viewscape. So there is a lot that you could do with the road that could meet all of the types of things that were described in the email that Will had written to you. A lot of those things and a lot of the traffic calming, speed things, making it more community centered, but still having the travel lane that trucks can go through at 25 miles an hour. You still have a Route 121 main thoroughfare through downtown. You still have to look both ways when you cross the road, so to speak. But you do have a lot to work with.
Yeah. So one of the early suggestions that was sent to us was that the grant pay for a design consultant that compiles citizen input, create a consensus vision, and then create a conceptual plan for Main Street. After the grant, the plans would be used to secure transportation funding for engineering, design, and construction. So this would be a phased in result. But the estimate for the concept plan was around $15,000. Carl?
Yeah, I have two comments. The first is when I hear 10-foot traffic lane, I think of the underpass under the railroad on Route 123. That's 10-foot lanes. And I can't meet another pickup with wide mirrors in that tunnel without bumping mirrors either against the wall, which would be the parked car, or the oncoming vehicle. So I think that to look at shrinking the width of the travel lane that much is just unwise. I really think we have to be very careful about that. I think too that in the sketch that Gary appended, and I realize that there are other possibilities, but we're looking at that 10-foot lane in that drawing being shared by bikes and vehicles. And I don't think that addresses Will's concern about having a more bicycle-friendly environment. The second comment I would like to make is sort of about the whole concept of a streetscape for the village. I'm uncomfortable with that whole notion. I think we have a streetscape. We have an iconic view, as Celia put it, up the main street from the East End to the Historical Society. And the idea of trying to create a unifying theme, that seems to be more appropriate for urban situation rather than from a rural village with a history and of eclectic buildings and eclectic styles. And I'm really nervous with the idea of creating a master plan and a master look for the street. I don't like it. It doesn't feel right to me.
I have a comment.
Okay, Matt?
I'd have to agree with Carl on that one. I know we have a very wide area there. And I did help to raise 2 children in this village, and we rode bike around quite a bit. It is true that there's a lot of speeding and big trucks that come through 121. And unfortunately, that's what we have coming through our village. And shrinking things down. I have a picture on my phone, I think, from several years back when the snow doesn't get removed from Saxtons River in a timely fashion or at all. I measured out that there was 8 feet from the curb to the edge of the snow in the wintertime that was frozen snow that hadn't been removed, which pushes all the cars out into the travel lanes that much further. So yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of making things smaller down Main Street.
Okay, we've heard from almost everyone except Rick. Rick, I saw that in your summary, you talked about curb cutouts to slow traffic, wider sidewalks, more green space. Do you want to add anything to your comments?
My summary was my at the meeting, I agreed to try to summarize what we had discussed at the thing. And so those were not a few notes were kind of some of my thoughts, but for the most part, I was just trying to put into words, simplify all the various topics that had been discussed into a few specific topics for us to evaluate.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie that, you know, like Matt, I think the fire station is a little bit dear to my heart. And,
well,
but that's neither here nor there. So there may have been some discussion there in mine that was a little tainted towards that.
Okay, the other, trying to keep track of where we are in this document and what things have been submitted. So we did talk about redevelopment of the Dish Tenny Hardware Fire Station and west end of the village, and we've sort of touched on that. Have we said everything we needed to about that idea? I think this, the comments that we received from the public include some by Susan Still talking about MSA and the difficulty of their handling the dish. They're longing, this is my interpretation, they're longing to be rid of the dish and to see that art center be more central without that eyesore of a building next door. Eyesore is my wording, not Susan's. Susan, did you want to add anything? Did I lose Susan? No, there you are. Sorry.
Just that the estimate, I think, Gary, this was done by Chuck Wise for the cost for the dish building was $11.5 thousand. Which to me means that there could be some room to include some looking at design for that whole end of Main Street to make the crossing safer between the park and whatever that becomes at the dish. So a little bit of not the repugnant master plan for streetscaping, but a little bit of that end of Main Street, which could become, I think that crossing at the roundabout is not safe.
Celia. You're muted, Celia.
Gary had mentioned in a private discussion years ago, the idea of a vehicle charging station in Saxtons River. And I would like to bring that back as possibly something that could happen in the space where the dish building comes down. That as I recall, that was an attraction to bring people into the village to spend their money at the market and attend things at Main Street Arts. And while they're doing that, charge up their electric vehicles. So I just wanted to raise that point for inclusion in the minutes at this time.
Mm-hmm. Did you get that, Carl?
Yep.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, Matt.
So Celia mentioned the building coming down. Is that something that's happening, or just if it does come down? The former Tenny's building.
Susan, do you want to respond to that?
We've provided the trustees with a couple of studies of the building. It is not salvageable. Every part of every system in the building is faulty. So what we have been advised by many experts is it must come down.
So the structure is condemned. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think the legal word condemned has been used, but we had a study last year by an engineer, and the trustees have all of that information. Also the brownfield studies that were done of the building. So you've got a lot of information about the really bad shape of the building. Yeah. And if you've been in there recently, you know. Everything leaks.
So those are in your email, Matt. I know those were sent earlier. I think before last meeting. As Susan said, 2 brownfield studies, and I think a study by Criterium Engineers. My takeaway was that site is not safe for human habitation, but it's not nobody has offered to take down the site. That's, that would have to be an additional project, depending on what we decide tonight. But I think that when I know that we spent some time discussing during the last meeting the fact that we have that red unusable building on the west end of the village. We have the inn, which is currently closed, and we have the building, which has often been a small restaurant on the other end of the building, on the other end of the village. And it would be great to have those open and available, adding to what at this point is a working market and a post office and the Main Street Arts. But at this point, we don't have other things. I mean, I love the idea of electric charging stations, and I assume that funding is being made available for them. But it seems to me it's best when paired with something that's going to take a couple of hours. You want to hook your car up while you're having dinner or while you're watching a lengthy play. It's not enough to hook it up while you're picking up eggs and a quart of milk. So those are my thoughts. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, so electric vehicle charging stations, good idea, and certainly can put them in. A municipal planning grant will not pay for the charging stations. And I did a walkthrough with GMP, and we identified sites in Main Street and Saxtons River where the charging stations could be put in. So the planning doesn't really need to happen there. The grant that funded the charging stations did not fund the Saxtons River site or the Rockingham Street and Bellows Falls site. It only funded the Waypoint, just because of the number of points it scored. But charging stations could be part of any project, just separate funding. Mm-hmm. And so my understanding of this project is that it involves looking at all of the things you were just describing, like what's in the neighborhood and what's a good fit design wise, what needs to happen for the demolition, what would the sequence and costs be, what would and what would highest and best uses, what uses could go into that lot, and what are the constraints for that, and getting community input on that piece as well. So combining that with what's possible, and a willingness to make, if there's some developments that you want that aren't allowed because of zoning, like say that was the fire station, there is a willingness to make zoning bylaw revisions, without having to wait for the whole bylaw regulations to go through that process, which they are going through.
So what you're saying, Gary, is if we wanted to favor some kind of commercial enterprise somewhere in there, we could ask for a zoning revision as part of this general redesign process?
Yeah, so if you have a municipal planning grant that shows that's the development that the community wants, that's appropriate for the neighborhood, the size and scale of the neighborhood and the village, then certainly that's enough backup to put through a zoning bylaw adjustment there. Yes.
Okay, Carl, is that your hand up? It looks like it is.
It's my understanding, Gary, from the information that you sent us, that in fact, the entire village is one zoning district, and that I'm not sure why a zoning bylaw change would be necessary. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I believe that some specific developments are prohibited, and if the use that was determined in this process was one of those that are prohibited, you would need a change to that code.
Okay, thanks.
So are we feeling like we have covered all of the proposals that have been brought forth last meeting and in between? I'm looking through the notes that have come to us. All right, I would like to propose for an initial start that we drop the streetscape, which people don't seem to be interested in. Am I reading the trustees incorrectly on that?
No.
Could you
Rick,
clarify?
you agree? Carl?
Could you just clarify what you mean we should be dropping?
So I'm hoping to narrow our choices for discussion at this point in the meeting. Yeah. So it seemed to me that there was very little interest in making the streetscape the focus of the municipal planning grant. This was Will's proposal that we focus on things like curb cuts, slowing people down, using the width of the street that we have to incorporate things like bike lanes. It seemed to me that I heard a relatively apathetic response to that. Well, don't take this personally. This is just us trying to get our business done. And I thought I saw Rick nod that was correct with him. Matt, would you agree?
Yes.
And Carl?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm sympathetic to Will's concerns, but I don't think it's our highest priority.
Okay, we want a walkable community, but we're going to cross off streetscape. I would also like to cross off the water exploration, the mapping and understanding of the water system, because I feel that's a much better match for the ARPA funds. But that's one viewpoint. So I'm looking to the rest of you for input. Rick, is that your hand? No, Carl's got his hand up though.
Yeah, I am. It was my proposal, so I am happy to defer it to ARPA, but I would like to at some point get together with Gary, I guess, and talk about how we might plan to move forward with that.
Okay, and I think Gary was willing to check with the League of Cities and Towns tomorrow on that. Is this Katie Buckley's project, Gary? Yeah. So I think you'll have a quick answer to that. And I'm certainly willing. I mean, this board has shown itself ready to hold a special meeting. We only need 3 people. You know, if Gary explores that and it's dead in the water, it really won't work with ARPA. I think you could come back to us, Carl, and ask us to reconsider. Okay, so I'm crossing off the water grant. So on my little cheat sheet, that leaves us with 2. One that looks at, and actually I have a feeling they're kind of similar. So what I heard tonight was that we could not use the municipal planning grant to go for a redesign of the actual fire station plan. That would be a more appropriate grant application for USDA funds. But we could evaluate the dish site as a possible look again at that for other uses, and in fact look perhaps at that end of the village for other uses. Comments? Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But can you clarify what you're talking about with other end of the village? So we have that site. I would be in favor of studying that site for something. It'd be great to have something that had businesses in it. But you're saying that end, so I don't know. That seems broad and to me. It's not
Okay.
defined.
So what would you like to see if we're looking at a grant that involves using spaces for their best use? Do you want to call out the things that you think should be in that municipal planning grant?
Well, it seems though design for the fire station is going to come from other funding.
We would have to apply for other funding for that. Right.
So there's some type of proposal talking about that site. And so
what site?
The former Golden Egg Tenney's Lumber Mill store site.
Okay.
So, but along with that, you're saying that end of the village. So I just want a clarification of,
so let's call that the west end of the village. I'm seeing Rick's hand and then Carl's, but Matt, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I just want a clarification is what more that involves than just that site.
Okay, so the proposal so far looks like the west end. Rick.
So when we think of it in those terms, I was thinking like a revitalization of the west end of the building, which would look at whatever becomes of the former Dish on Main, Tenney Lumber Mill, the parking in that area, if when Main Street Arts comes back, but when they come back, parking has always been an issue around here. Perhaps the kind of, even though the money maybe we can't use the money for planning the fire station, maybe looking at how the new fire station would integrate into all of that, how all of those things could maybe be integrated together to make sure that it fits and is aesthetic and looks good, including maybe, there has been some discussion about the little traffic circle and that was a topic somebody brought up before about, I don't know what they thought about doing there, but that kind of taking, because we've got two decrepit buildings. We've got the Dish on Main, we've got the fire station. Mm-hmm. We've got kind of a plan of what we want to do with the fire station. We don't really have a plan for Main Street Arts, the Dish, but how does that all come together? I mean, we could sit here and brainstorm a great thing. Let's tear down the Dish building and put up this, and then say, oh crap, we forgot about parking, or we forgot about who knows what that could have an impact. So I think that for me, the kind of, and the term may not be the right term, but the revitalization of the West End, meaning primarily the Dish on Main and the fire station, and that's that area, and how do we make it all work together?
Okay. Carl, you had your hand up.
Yes, I think that if we're talking about, and I like Rick's phrase, revitalization of West End, what to do with the Dish property certainly should be part of that. I think looking at pedestrian safety crossing between the north and south sides of the street should be part of that. I had another thought. Oh, yes. John, in his proposal last meeting, mentioned the building adjacent to the Dish, the apartment building, I believe. Is that also in the discussion?
John Bohannon?
John Bohannon, yeah.
We're going to put John Bohannon on the spot. Celia, is he within range?
Yeah. Yes. I'm right.
Did you mention something about an apartment building adjacent to the Dish at the last meeting?
No, I mentioned that that's something that could come down as part of the Dish coming down.
So you would bring the Dish down and put housing there?
No, I said Dish and the adjacent apartment.
The other little end of the building between the red building and Main Street Arts itself. There's what used to be an apartment.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about.
For a very short time.
Talking about that portion of that big building.
Okay. All right. Does that clarify, Carl?
Well, when we're talking about the Dish building,
yes,
is more of a question for Susan as well. Are we also talking about that apartment at the end of the Dish building, or just the ugly red structure?
Go ahead, Susan.
The whole structure, including that end of it, that it was an apartment.
Okay, thank you.
Was that also Pizza Paul and Mary?
No. That building's gone.
Susan?
Pizza Paul and Mary's was torn down by Main Street Arts as part of its reconstruction. So that was 33 Main Street, I believe, and it's now part of 35 Main Street.
I have a couple questions.
Okay, hold on. Let me make sure we've gotten everybody else out of the way. Okay, Matt, focus on you.
So two things. One, I keep hearing the crosswalk being mentioned, and I guess when people start talking about things, and of course the traffic is fast, and a lot of big trucks. I guess the first thing is, what is the proposal? A bridge, a tunnel, and how many accidents have been had with people walking across crosswalks in Saxon River? I guess I would want to know that before any drastic measures are taken there.
So remember, this is a planning grant. I'm sorry to interrupt you. But,
right. So
yeah.
I'm just, I'm hearing people comment about stuff. So I hate to throw good money after something that we aren't going to do anything about.
Okay.
So I don't see that the crosswalks are horrific. The other is, if we're moving forward, if we're going to move forward with, one option is to study this former Golden Egg Tenney building and property and what to do with it. Sounds as though the building has to come down. I would hate to lose the parking in front of it, but who is going to be the owner of the property? Is Main Street Art going to be?
No, this would all have to be hashed out. And the proposal that I like is the one 37 Main Street site redevelopment, which calls for a consultant to work with a community planning group to explore options and to get consensus so that we come out of it with a surveyed site plan and several options. Because this is just plans. And then we have to work on phased implementation.
Great.
I saw Carl's hand, so I'm going to go to you next, Carl.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that some of the questions that Matt was raising about crosswalks and what to do with them, that's something that the planning grant would ask be done, not something that we need to hash out now.
Okay. So I'm returning to a proposal that we looked at 2 weeks ago called 37 Main Street Site Development. And if you'll be patient with me, I am going to read it. I'm not sure it's the right proposal for us, but looking at the list of things that we seem agreed on, I think it's the closest to what we have. And it seems to me it's a good starting place. So this is Gary Fox's terminology. So it's 37 Main Street site, which is what we've been talking about, the Dish, the Tenney hardware store, that whole red building. The grant proposes, the proto strip mall is beyond repair. It has been many things, but redevelopment is needed. Many ideas have been communicated, but there are no clear winners. Most distressing, some redevelopment concepts are prohibited under existing zoning. The grant proposes, this is one speculative use of the grant, hiring a community planner or landscape architect to sponsor a design charrette. I think that's a kind of competition where people put up ideas to redevelop this site. Redevelopment must also be concerned with integrating the new park and post office with the Main Street Arts Building. The grant teaches us how to approach infill development projects and explores whether we need to change the zoning bylaws. So the deliverable, the thing we would get at the end after this project was done, would be a zoning application with a surveyed site plan of the proposed redevelopment, and if necessary, zoning bylaws code revisions. So that actually has a design charrette. It does not have, as I initially thought, a community meeting. That was that was under a different proposal. A design consultant who compiles citizen input, creates a consensus vision, and then creates a well-supported conceptual plan. So that was a different approach to the same kind of issues.
So Amy,
Yes.
Just a charrette is what you just described. It is a community public meeting. It's not a competition. It is where people put in ideas together and it comes up with a consensus for designs. And so these proposals are just rough sketching out of ideas that were brought to us that Rick Cowan, John Dunbar, Guy Payne, Chuck, and I hashed through and said, okay, here's 3 general topics for what you're asking for. The specifics, we can adjust with it, like deliverables that were talked about to here. We can roll those into that concept of, revitalizing the West End, of coming out with, a use for that property, a permit application. I did hear the question about who would own that property as it gets demolished. If you have that figured out now, that's one thing. If you don't, that could be a deliverable of the study too, is recommended ownership options. But again, that's just for a rough sketch, and then we add to it the things that you've come up with here for deliverables you want to see.
Can we discuss this idea? What do you think, folks? Carl, is that a hand that you're resting your chin on, or do you have a comment?
Sorry, I'm just resting my chin. So I guess I do have a question about whether we're considering including thoughts about the current fire station property as part of the West End revitalization.
So am I hearing you correctly? You would like to see consideration of this revitalization of the West End extend as far as the current fire station?
I'm asking if that's what we're
it's up to us.
I'd prefer not to include it, but I mean, if we're going to, so it's a study. We know the fire station is the fire station where it is now, and we can rebuild a new one there. So having somebody study it, I think, is somewhat of a waste of time. But
okay, I just wanted to clarify because we talked about that at one point.
Just my opinion. That's all. If others feel differently, then so be it. But we're talking about one property and or the West End. So how, with planning, how do they decide?
It's up to us. We write the grant.
Right. How big the West End is. Yeah.
Rick, do you have a feeling on this?
No, I mean, my only thought about including the fire station, and part of it is just is more about like integrate. I would hope that they're going to do this anyways, is just making sure that everything is integrated into the village as a whole and works, it works together. The one thing I would like is, to me, the parking in front of the post office is horrendous. But it's more of it's not the amount of parking, it's more of the people who park there. And how to get them trained that you should park facing west on the west side.
Well, I'm not going there, Rick. I'm not going there. Strike those remarks. Only joking. No, if that's your concern, yeah. Carl.
Yeah, I do think that it would be prudent to include in this study any changes that we might think appropriate in traffic flow in that specific part of Main Street. For example, Heidi's idea about enlarging the memorial circle, or figuring some way to prevent people from parking eastbound in front of the post office, or I don't know what, pedestrian safety crossing Main Street. But those should be things that should be looked at or thought about as we're looking at these possible plans for the area.
Yeah, I would just comment from a planning perspective, when you are redeveloping a property, the way it interacts with its neighbors, it is adjacent to the parking for the post office. It is right at that intersection, and the way that use interfaces with those pieces, it would be a natural part of the planning grant to look at all of those. I mean, it could even be making the traffic circle bigger. It could be getting rid of it. It could be putting a stop sign there. That would slow traffic down. but anyway, that's not my area. I'm clueless about it, but it would make sense to include all of those aspects in a planning grant. That's not a problem if that's what you're interested in.
I think it's important to consider.
I'm willing to work with Gary to write up, and I'll read you over the list that I've been making. I'm sure Carl will have excellent notes as well, to work up this grant. Gary, do we have time to revisit it one more time? Our next meeting is a week after Labor Day. Is that the 13th?
So the Planning Commission meeting, I think it's the 4th Thursday in September. So we would want to have a pretty well fleshed out grant application a week before that. So 3rd week of September. So there is time for the trustees to look at it again if we draft something over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. How do you feel about that, folks? I'll work with Gary and try and come up with a draft that represents what we've discussed tonight, and you can review it. We can all review it at our next meeting and then submit it to the Planning Commission.
So is this in regards to the property we're talking about?
37 Main Street.
Do we need a motion and a vote on that?
Yeah, we're just trying to figure things out here.
Yeah.
So okay. We're still in the discussion thing. We're not quite at a motion yet. Carl?
Yeah, I think that it would be helpful if we could have a draft to look at a couple days ahead of the next meeting. So
okay.
Questions together, rather than looking at it, say, Monday afternoon for a meeting Monday evening.
Okay. Gary, would you have time to work on that with me?
Yes.
Okay. So are there other comments before we proceed with a motion? Anybody feel like we haven't dealt with any of the projects? Anybody want to go back and rethink what we've crossed off the list or change at this point?
Nope.
Okay, it's very unusual to have the chair make a motion, but I'm going to do it. I propose, this is a motion, Carl, that Amy Howlett work with Gary Fox to prepare a municipal planning grant focusing on 37 Main Street. The grant would involve a design charrette to revitalize the west end of Main Street.
Is that it?
To be given to the trustees a week before the meeting of September 13th.
I'm going to need you to run through that again because you were talking faster than I could write.
I'll never be able to get it. We're going to have to do it off the recording. Amy Howlett proposes to write a grant with Gary, a municipal planning grant.
Yeah.
With Gary Fox, dealing with 37 Main Street. And involving a design charrette for the highest and best uses of the property. The grant will be given to the trustees on the before the 13th for discussion and final vote before moving on to the Rockingham Planning Commission.
Second.
Anybody want to revise that? Did I leave anything out that's important? My list here talks about parking, uses for the property, the traffic circle, looking out for pedestrian safety and traffic flow.
I would just ask if getting the draft on Friday, September 10th allows you time to review it and think about it before September 13th.
Does that work for everyone?
Works for me.
Okay.
I love reviewing municipal documents on the weekend.
Well, my hope is to work on this sooner rather than later, Gary, but depending on your schedule. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to make 37 Main the focus of our municipal planning grant with an immediate deadline for circulation of September 10th, but final vote at the meeting of September 13th. Is there any further discussion?
Is the 13th a special meeting?
No, it is a regular meeting. That is our regular meeting because of Labor Day.
Okay, that's right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We discussed it, but
I know.
No harm in bringing it up again. And I will have to warn it. I will have to warn it. I have a feeling maybe I did both at the same time, but I'll have to go back and look and see what I did. Okay, are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Hold up your hand. Looks like it's unanimous of all present, Carl, Amy, Rick, and Matt. So that motion passes. I believe we have no other business tonight. Anybody want to hammer in the nail that is this grant? Are we all set on that?
All set.
Okay, where's my agenda? Do we have anything? I don't believe we need an executive session. Do we have anything else on the agenda except for the magic of adjourning? We do not. Is everybody ready to adjourn?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you all.
So long.